Every so often in our house, a scream goes out, "Ah!" And it is followed by little running feet and shouts of, "Daddy, Daddy!" And it doesn't matter what I'm doing, whether I'm on a work call, in a meeting, watching the TV, Rose and Saoirse burst in, and one of them will grab me and they'll say, "Daddy, Daddy, a spider!" And that's it. And I will get up, leave what I'm doing, daddy hero. I'll get a cup and a piece of paper and get the spider, and then the girls will be watching from behind, and I'll take it out and throw it over the fence, and two little girls in tow watching me kind of save them from the spider. And kids are great. They teach you so much about life. And one of the things that I love about children is their boldness, the single-mindedness of a child. So the other day I was doing the morning routine with Saoirse. She just woke up, and I was downstairs with Jack, and she comes in and she's like, "Daddy, I would like honey and peanut butter on my toast for breakfast." And I was like, "Oh, that sounds nice." And she was like, "Well, you're going to make it for me. Make it for me now, please." And I was like, "Well, why should I make you honey and peanut butter toast?" And she said, "Because you're my daddy, and that's what you do." And I couldn't argue. I was like, "Fair enough." So I made it. And it's just interesting. I just want you to hold these kind of thoughts in your head. So I want us to think about today, what is Christ saying? What is he saying when he says, there's those passages, "Let the children come to me, be like children," sits the child. He says, "This is an example to you." What is Christ saying when he does these things? And looking at this passage, what do we read? We say, what's interesting is, before I get to that point, is Jesus uses this example of trying to get them to look at children in the context of two other things that is going on. So firstly, he's talking about the cross. So in our passage it says, "The Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men. They will kill him, and after 3 days he will rise again." Then it says, "But they did not understand what he meant, and they were afraid to ask him about it." That's verse 32. So he's teaching about the cross. And the next is, it says, "They came to Capernaum," and I actually think our passage started here, so I should have read the other verses, but anyway. "They came to Capernaum, and when they were in the house, he asked them about, 'What are you arguing about on the road?' But they kept quiet, because what they had argued about on the road was who was the greatest." So in response to teaching about the cross, and in response to teaching about who would be the greatest, he brings a child in front of them. So we have Jesus teaching about what's going to happen to him, and that he will die, and that he's pointing to the cross. And then we have this argument about who is the greatest. And it's not recorded in our passage here, but Jesus teaches again about children later on in the next chapter. And he says that you should become like one of these. And this is in the context of John and his brother asking that one of them sit on his left and one of them sit on his right. So again, a kind of similar argument about they wanted to be the greatest and they wanted this glory for themselves. So I want us to think about the context of a child, and I want us to think about holding the cross that he's teaching on, and also this idea of who's the greatest in front of them. So first, the cross. Throughout history, we hear of great figures, heroic figures, overcoming great odds. Achilles, the great warrior who sacks Troy and defeats Hector, this mighty warrior. Or Alexander the Great, who conquered most of the world, the kind of known world at the time, this great warrior, this great figure. And then if you think about faiths, not only in history, but in faiths, a lot of faiths have their victors, their heroes. So in Judaism, Moses. Obviously, we have Moses too, but we move to kind of focusing on Christ. But in Judaism, Moses defeats Pharaoh. He leads the people out of slavery into the promised land. He's this great heroic figure that defeats this powerful ruler at the time. Now, Moses grows old and he's surrounded by his people. In Buddhism, Buddha was 80 years old and was meant to have died in this place of real serenity with his disciples gathered around him as he laid and went into rest. Or in Islam, for instance, Muhammad, who overcame great odds and oppressors, and he died at a very old age, full of years, surrounded by his followers. But this is not the case with Jesus. Jesus died alone. And he was young. Think about it. Did you ever think about it? Jesus was quite young. I'm 8 years older than Jesus was at the moment. So Jesus died young, alone, naked, and rejected. And the handful of followers that he had fled and left him. And the cross, by all apparent means, is a place of humiliation, of defeat, of shame, of trauma. And when you look at it in normal terms, it makes no sense. And I think Jesus, the first thing I want to draw out of childlike, is Jesus is suggesting that if they come to this story, God's story of redemptive work, with anything other than a childlike faith and trust, then they will miss it. They will miss what's going on, what he's doing. You must become like a child, the way that a child trusts, the way that a child believes, the way that a child clings to and accepts what is going on from the leader, from the parent, in a sense. If I sometimes find it really interesting, like with Jack, I can put him in the car and he will not know if we're driving to France, like we were over the summer, or if we're going just 5 minutes down the road. He has no clue. He just happily get in the car because I'm putting him there. There's something really powerful about this childlike innocence that just says, I'm going to trust you. I don't understand it, but I'm going to trust you. So that's one easy kind of understanding of this. And the cross, we know, turns from this humiliating, shameful place of loss to the ultimate symbol, place of healing, of hope, of triumph, of God's justice, of his mercy and his love. That this is what the cross ultimately is. And there is the objective place where the objective kind of viewpoint of the cross, where sin is defeated, God's judgment and mercy is seen. This is an objective reality, meaning it kind of takes place outside. And then there is a subjective kind of reality of the cross, where forgiveness is for you and the individual, where you can experience forgiveness, where you can see that the cross isn't just a symbol or a thing out there, it's a reality that changes you. That something goes on within us, that we make Christ our own. We make the cross our own. And when we truly experience and know God's love in action, when the cross of Christ becomes our own meeting place with God. So there's an objective reality, but there is a subjective thing going on in the cross. And this is very powerful and it's quite sometimes difficult to accept this kind of the cross for ourselves. We can see it kind of there, but it's quite difficult to make it our own. And I think this is the second point that Jesus is drawing out when it comes to childlikeness. We need to be a child again and come to the cross. So back to this spider and, Daddy, help, a spider. The girls know that I will deal with it. That go to Daddy, I will deal with the spider. We're safe with him. They also kind of recognize that they can't. They don't want to go near this thing. They cannot deal with it. They don't want to deal with it. It's nothing that they're going to deal with. Oh my goodness, this is crazy. Run. Get out. Go to Daddy. Children are in absolute dependence and in need of all things. And they kind of know it. They go, I can't do it. I need you. And there's something really simple and profound about that. That they accept this sense of, I'm a child, I can't do it. Make me my toast. Get the spider. I can't do it. And this is the second trait. There's something profound when a person knows they cannot save themselves. You cannot get yourself to heaven. I need Jesus and Jesus alone. And in my own life, when I met with my failings, when I met with the sin that I have done, it helps, kind of strangely, helps me to recognize there is no way I can do this myself. I cannot get myself to heaven. Only Christ can. Only what he has done on the cross saves me from my sin, the hurt that I've done. And it is a realization of the absolute dependence and need that draws me closer to Christ. It drives me to the cross. And we need to know, like a child, I can't do it. I cannot do it. But Daddy can. Christ can. He's done it for me. So the first thing is a humility and a kind of acceptance of trust. The second is a realization you are in need of all things and only Christ can do it. And the third thing is the profound thing that I think about childlikeness is their humble boldness, the boldness of children So many times, I'll be in a meeting, or even you've probably experienced this with me after church. You're talking to me, and my child runs up to me and immediately just interrupts. Daddy, and it's like, okay, my love, darling, so hold on. Parents, you'll know it. Or, at home, they'll just push open my door. It doesn't matter if I'm on a Zoom call, an interview, a meeting, bang, door goes open. Daddy. There's a boldness to children, which is, it's not arrogance. It's not arrogance. There's an innocence to it. But it is an understanding that I have complete access to my Father. That I am the biggest thing in his world. Like, I'm super important to him. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of a weird thing where it's like, it's not arrogant, but it is profound that they know that this person is for me completely. And they completely love me. And I can always go to them. That's my daddy. And sometimes we lose that as we get older, but when children and toddlers, they just know that person is completely for me. And there is a boldness there. Kids get that. Kids get that. There's a childlikeness in acknowledging how actually important you are to God. That's a place of humility, not arrogance, that you matter to him. Like a child would know that their parents love them, that they're for them. You matter to God. You are profoundly, profoundly the center of his eye. And it's, sometimes I find it a struggle when you hear people who say things like, oh, God wouldn't do it for me, and, and this kind of false humility. Oh, I'm, this and that and the other, and they wouldn't really, he wouldn't really save me because I'm this, that, and the other. It's really reducing of God. It's a really low view of who God is. When we are called to simply go, God has done it all. He is where I find this acceptance. He is where I can enter boldly into his throne room of grace, knowing that I'm his son, I'm his daughter. Part of childlikeness is recognizing how important you are to your dad, to your Father in heaven. Again, not because of anything you've done, but because you're his child. Jesus is teaching us also about the cross. He is saying, you must know that I'm the only one who can deal with all your spiders. I'm the only one who can deal with your sin. You must come to me and me alone. And coming to me, recognize in boldness how much God loves you. Jesus goes to the cross. He dies for you. And the other leaders and these heroes of different faiths with their victories, they may say things like, God loves you and God is for you, and they, be part of the victory. But it can just feel like information, like it's history. It's out there somewhere. But Christ says, this is my story, and my story is your story. And it's, in a sense, his story. You'll see what I've done there, history. His story is your story. And it's about moving from, again, sometimes we get trapped in this is information. Even in Christianity, the cross is information. It is not. It should be more. It should impact you and change your heart, that you see what Christ has done for you on the cross. Your failings, your mistakes, that he's dealt with it, and it can be done away with. It cost him to go to the cross. It can't just be like, oh, Pat, push that to the side. It's done. You're loved and forgiven. That just feels numb and separating. No, there had to be an action. Your sin cost. Your failings or the failings that have been done to you hurt God. He doesn't want that. He knows that pain exists. Whether someone has greatly sinned against you and failed you, and the pain that you've hurt, God cares. Or whether you've done that to someone else and you've hurt someone, God cares. But he cares enough to do something about it, and he sends his son, who goes to the cross, who dies for you. He shows you that he is part of this journey, your journey. The Son of God dies on the cross. The Son separates from the Father, loses the Father. And remember, also on the cross, in a sense, the Father loses the Son. It's a very painful act. Now, I don't want to get into Trinitarian kind of division here, but think about the cost of what your sin has done. It costs God. But God chose to take it. And he says, I love you. It should not just be information. It should show you your value, that you see what God has done for you. But even more strikingly, it should show you your worst mistake, the greatest evil you've done, is dealt with on the cross. At your worst, at your very worst, God says, I love you. How do you know? Because of this. And you need to be a child and accept it. And then allow it to precipitate your heart and change you. How much does God love you that he's gone to the cross? At your very worst, he did it for you. And he's willing to save you no matter what you've done. In a weird way, thus your greatest failing can reveal God's greatest love, which is so gaudy. Do you know what I mean? Take that thing that the devil will use to tell you how dirty and terrible and disgusting and foolish you are. Take that very thing and then turn it and go, how much I love you. Because I know you've done that. And I died for you, so that will be forgiven. You need to be a child sometimes to accept that truth. So be a child, trust God. Recognize your need, your absolute need for him. And also recognize in boldness your value to him. Burst through the door. You know, the Hebrews writer, you can boldly approach the throne of grace. The way that Saoirse will just bowl into my study and, Daddy, we can do that. And you can do that. And it's not like, oh, humble me. Do it because that is who you are. The value that God places on your life.